Welcome to this comprehensive guide on Mastering Vulnerability Assessment. I am Sri Ramachandar Bandi, a senior cybersecurity consultant, and I'll be your guide throughout this journey. As we embrace the digital age, cybersecurity has become a key concern for businesses, governments, and individuals alike. Ensuring the safety of our digital systems is no longer an option, but a necessity. However, before we can safeguard our systems, we need to understand the vulnerabilities they may have. This is where the process of vulnerability assessment comes into play. In this video, we will demystify the process of vulnerability assessment, breaking it down into simple, easy-to-understand steps. Whether you're a seasoned IT professional or a beginner keen on learning the ropes of cybersecurity, this guide is designed to equip you with the knowledge you need to conduct a thorough vulnerability assessment. So let's dive into the world of cybersecurity together and master the art of vulnerability assessment. Stay tuned. Ever wondered how secure your system, network, or applications are from potential threats? Each day, countless digital systems face the risk of being exploited due to vulnerabilities in their design or configuration. But fear not, there's a systematic process that can help us identify, quantify, and prioritize these security vulnerabilities. It's called vulnerability assessment. In essence, vulnerability assessment is like a health checkup for your digital environment. Just as a doctor examines a patient to detect signs of potential health issues in a vulnerability assessment, we scrutinize a system, network, or application to discover any weaknesses that could be exploited by attackers. The ultimate goal? To protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the target system. But why is vulnerability assessment so important? Well, imagine leaving your house with the doors and windows wide open. You're practically inviting thieves to come in. Similarly, leaving your digital systems unchecked for vulnerabilities is like giving a free pass to cyber attackers. They can compromise the system, steal sensitive data, or even disrupt your services. Vulnerability assessment helps prevent this. By identifying vulnerabilities, we can take steps to fix them before they are exploited. This is not a one-time process, but an ongoing effort to maintain the security of your systems in the face of evolving threats. In the world of IT, understanding and conducting a vulnerability assessment is an essential skill. It's the first line of defense against cyber threats. Whether you're securing a small business network, a large corporate system, or a single web application, vulnerability assessment is your guide to understanding and addressing the vulnerabilities within. So, are you ready to dive into the fascinating world of vulnerability assessment? Over the next few minutes, we'll take you through the steps involved in a typical vulnerability assessment, from defining the scope to continuous monitoring. We'll also share some practical examples to help you understand the process better. Knowing how to conduct a vulnerability assessment is crucial for anyone in the IT field. So buckle up and let's get started on this cybersecurity journey together. First things first, defining the scope of the assessment. It's like setting the boundaries for a game of hide and seek. It's crucial to pinpoint exactly what you're looking for and where you're looking. This is where scope definition comes into play in a vulnerability assessment. Imagine you're conducting an assessment for a company's web application. Your scope would include the server infrastructure, the database, and the communication between different components. It's about understanding the whole ecosystem of the web application. You see, without a clear scope, you're essentially searching in the dark. You might miss key vulnerabilities or waste time on areas outside of your focus. Like a detective, you need to know exactly where to look to find the clues you need. So remember, before diving into the assessment, take a moment to define your scope. A well-defined scope ensures a focused and effective assessment. Next up, taking inventory of all assets. The asset inventory stage is crucial in the vulnerability assessment process. This involves identifying and cataloging every piece of hardware, software, and data that forms part of the target environment. Consider it as creating a map of your digital landscape. Why is this important, you ask? Well, it's simple. If you don't know what you have, you can't protect it. By identifying all the assets, you ensure no potential vulnerabilities are left unaddressed. Now, how do you conduct an asset inventory? It's like making a detailed shopping list. You systematically create a list that includes all servers, network devices, databases, applications, and even data repositories. Yes, it can be tedious, but it's absolutely vital. Remember, this list isn't a one-and-done deal. As your system evolves, so should your asset inventory. Regular updates and reviews are a must. An accurate asset inventory ensures no potential vulnerabilities are overlooked. Let's ensure we've got everything listed before we move on. Now that we know what we're dealing with, it's time to think like an attacker. Welcome to the world of threat modeling, a vital process in vulnerability assessment. Picture it as a game of chess where you need to anticipate your opponent's moves, strategize your defense, and prepare for a counterattack. You're not just addressing the present, but you're also predicting the future. Threat modeling is all about understanding the potential threats and vulnerabilities that could compromise your system. It's like a blueprint of possible attacks, a roadmap that outlines how an attacker might exploit weaknesses to gain unauthorized access or disrupt operations. Think of your system as a fortress. Now imagine a horde of invaders trying to breach your walls. They could use a battering ram against your gates, akin to a brute force attack. They might dig tunnels underneath, an analogy for insider threats. Or perhaps they could launch flaming arrows over your walls, which could symbolize a distributed denial of service attack. By visualizing these scenarios, you can better understand how to fortify your defenses. A practical example of threat modeling could be identifying threats such as SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and insecure configurations in a web application. SQL injection, for instance, is like a Trojan horse. It allows attackers to sneak malicious code into your database through seemingly harmless user inputs. Cross-site scripting, on the other hand, is akin to a spy slipping through your gates. It lets attackers inject malicious scripts into web pages viewed by other users, effectively turning your own users into unwitting accomplices. Remember, threat modeling isn't a one-time event. It's a continuous process that evolves as new threats emerge and as your system changes. It's about staying one step ahead of potential attackers, anticipating their moves, and outsmarting them at their own game. In the end, threat modeling helps us to not just react to attacks, but to proactively prepare for them. It's an essential part of vulnerability assessment, providing us with a clearer understanding of our system's weaknesses and how they might be exploited. Understanding potential threats is the first step towards mitigating them. And that's exactly what we'll be tackling in the next scene, identifying and addressing these vulnerabilities, so stay tuned. With potential threats in mind, it's time to find the vulnerabilities. Vulnerability identification is akin to a treasure hunt. Only the treasures are the weak points in your system that could potentially be exploited by attackers. It's the stage where we actively scan and analyze the target environment to discover these vulnerabilities. It's like a doctor performing a thorough checkup, probing and prodding to find out what's wrong. How do we conduct this vulnerability identification? We use a variety of tools and techniques to inspect the system, network, or application. It's not just about looking at the surface, but delving deep into the infrastructure to uncover hidden issues. This could involve reviewing code, examining system configurations, or scrutinizing network traffic. A key aspect of vulnerability identification is automation. While manual checks are important, automated tools can speed up the process and cover a larger scope. Think of these tools as your detective squad, tirelessly searching for clues. They can help identify issues such as outdated software, missing patches, or misconfigurations that could leave your system open to attack. There are many tools available to help with this, including Nessus, OpenVAS, and Qualys. For example, let's say we're using Nessus to scan our network infrastructure. Nessus is a comprehensive vulnerability scanner that can detect a wide range of issues. It starts by performing a network sweep to identify all active devices. Then, it inspects each device, checking for known vulnerabilities and configuration issues. The result is a detailed report of potential weak points in your system. But remember, these tools are just aids. They can help us find vulnerabilities, but it's up to us to understand their significance and decide how to address them. Here's a tip. Don't be overwhelmed by the number of vulnerabilities these tools might uncover. Not all vulnerabilities are created equal. Some might be serious, while others are less critical. It's important to focus on the vulnerabilities that pose the most risk to your system. Identifying vulnerabilities is like finding the enemy's weak points. And once we've identified them, we can move on to assessing the risk they pose and prioritizing our remediation efforts. But that's for the next scene. We've identified the vulnerabilities, but how dangerous are they? This is where risk assessment enters the scene. It's a process that evaluates the potential impact and likelihood of exploitation for each identified vulnerability. Think of it as an appraisal of the threats we've uncovered. The objective? To understand the potential harm these vulnerabilities could cause if exploited. Imagine you've discovered a vulnerability that could allow an attacker to access sensitive data. How severe is that? Consider the type of data at risk, the potential for damage, and the likelihood that an attacker would exploit this vulnerability. If the data is highly sensitive and the flaw is easy to exploit, the risk level would be high. Once you've evaluated the risks, it's time to assign a level to them. This could be as simple as low, medium, or high. A high-risk vulnerability might be a flaw that could lead to a significant data breach, while a low-risk vulnerability might only allow minor unauthorized access. But the work doesn't stop there. Once we've assessed the risks, we need to prioritize them. Prioritization is crucial in managing vulnerabilities effectively. It's all about answering the question, which vulnerabilities should we tackle first? Let's take an example. You've identified 100 vulnerabilities, 10 of which are high risk. You might be tempted to fix the easiest ones first, but that's not the best strategy. Instead, prioritize fixing the high-risk vulnerabilities, even if they require more resources or time. This approach ensures that you address the most dangerous vulnerabilities first, reducing the likelihood of a serious security breach. Remember, not all vulnerabilities are created equal. Some pose a greater threat than others. By accurately assessing risks and prioritizing them, you can ensure that you're focusing your efforts where they're needed most. You're not just fixing vulnerabilities, you're preventing potential disasters. Assessing risks and prioritizing them ensures that the most dangerous vulnerabilities are addressed first. So, the next time you're faced with a list of vulnerabilities, remember, assess, prioritize, and then act. It's the smart way to keep your systems secure. We've identified and prioritized the vulnerabilities. Now let's act. At this stage of the vulnerability assessment process, we move into the realm of reporting, remediation, and validation. Reporting is all about communication. It's the process of compiling a detailed report that highlights the identified vulnerabilities, associated risks, and recommended remediation steps. For instance, a report might include a summary of vulnerabilities, such as outdated software or insecure configurations, their potential impact, and step-by-step instructions for mitigation. This report serves as a roadmap for the IT team to navigate through the terrain of vulnerabilities and address them effectively. Now, let's talk about remediation. This is the stage where we roll up our sleeves and get to work. Remediation involves implementing measures to address and fix the identified vulnerabilities. This could be as simple as applying a software patch, or as complex as updating network configurations. For example, if the report identified a vulnerability due to an outdated software, the remediation step would involve updating that software to its latest secure version. Remediation may also involve conducting security awareness training for staff to prevent social engineering attacks. But how do we know if our remediation efforts were successful? Here's where validation comes into play. Validation is the process of verifying that remediation efforts were successful and that vulnerabilities have been addressed effectively. This could involve performing a follow-up scan to confirm that previously identified vulnerabilities have been resolved. For instance, if we applied a patch to fix a software vulnerability, a follow-up scan would ensure that the patch was correctly applied and the vulnerability no longer exists. In essence, reporting provides a clear picture of the vulnerabilities landscape. Remediation is the action we take to fix the vulnerabilities, and validation gives us the assurance that our efforts have been successful. Reporting, remediation, and validation ensure that vulnerabilities are not just identified but also fixed. This triad forms the cornerstone of a robust vulnerability assessment process, helping us not just to uncover weaknesses but to reinforce them, ensuring the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of our systems in the face of evolving threats. The job isn't over yet. Security is an ongoing process. Indeed, the final step in the vulnerability assessment process is continuous monitoring. This is the process of maintaining a constant watch over your systems, networks, and applications to ensure that your security posture remains strong even as new threats emerge. So, why is continuous monitoring important? Well, New vulnerabilities are discovered daily, and attackers are always evolving their tactics. Without constant vigilance, you might miss a critical weakness and leave your system exposed. Continuous monitoring helps you stay ahead of the curve, identifying and addressing new vulnerabilities as soon as they emerge. But how do you establish ongoing monitoring? It involves a combination of automated tools and manual processes. You might implement intrusion detection systems, which monitor your network for suspicious activity and raise alerts when potential threats are detected. These systems are like the watchful eyes of your security team, constantly scanning for any signs of trouble. Another key aspect of continuous monitoring is conducting regular vulnerability scans. These scans should be performed at regular intervals, perhaps weekly, monthly, or quarterly, depending on your organization's size and the sensitivity of your data. Regular scans help ensure that no new vulnerabilities have slipped through the cracks. For example, let's imagine you're running a large e-commerce platform. You might establish continuous monitoring by implementing an intrusion detection system to watch for suspicious activity, such as repeated failed login attempts or unusual data transfers. Meanwhile, you'd also conduct weekly vulnerability scans to check for new weaknesses, like outdated software or insecure configurations. If a new vulnerability is discovered, you'd follow the same process of risk assessment, prioritization, remediation, and validation that we've previously discussed. In summary, continuous monitoring is like a security guard who never sleeps. It's a critical part of maintaining your security posture, helping to ensure that your systems remain secure in the face of constantly evolving threats. So remember, continuous monitoring ensures the system's security posture is maintained in the face of evolving threats. Vulnerability assessments are a vital part of maintaining system security. We've journeyed through the process, beginning with defining the scope, creating an asset inventory, and modeling potential threats. We've seen how to identify vulnerabilities using various tools, and how to assess and prioritize these risks based on their potential impact. We've learned that reporting, remediation, and validation are key to closing out these vulnerabilities, ensuring they've been addressed effectively. And finally, we've emphasized the importance of continuous monitoring to maintain a strong cybersecurity posture. This comprehensive process is crucial to proactively identifying and addressing security vulnerabilities, thereby reducing the risk of unauthorized access and data breaches. It's a cycle that requires regular repetition as threats evolve and new vulnerabilities emerge. The process might seem complex, but with practice, anyone can learn to effectively assess vulnerabilities and enhance system security.